Come all you weary, come all you thirsty, come to the well that never runs dry. Drink of the water, come and thirst no more. Come all you sinners, come find His mercy, come to the table, He will satisfy. Taste of His goodness, find what you're looking for. For God so loved the world that He gave us His one and only Son to save us. Whoever believes in Him will live forever. Bring all your failures, bring your addictions, come lay them down at the foot of the cross. Jesus is waiting there with open arms, oh, with open arms. For God so loved the world that He gave us His one and only Son to save us. Whoever believes in Him will live forever. The power of hell forever defeated. Now it is well, I'm walking in freedom. For God so loved, God so loved the world. For God so loved the world that He gave us His one and only Son to save us. Whoever believes in Him will live forever. The power of hell forever defeated. Now it is well, I'm walking in freedom. For God so loved, God so loved the world. Bring all your failures, bring your addictions, come lay them down at the foot of the cross. Jesus is waiting, God so loved the world.
Welcome to Community Christian Church Online. I'm Ryan Arnold. I'm the student minister here at CCC, and I'm so glad you logged on today as we continue in our series, Same Difference. During this series, we've been looking at the book of 1 Corinthians in the Bible. It's actually a letter written by the Apostle Paul. And this letter is Paul's response to the Corinthian church after finding out that things were kind of a mess there. The city of Corinth itself was kind of this anything-goes society with no real rules, and some of that started to leak into the church. So Paul uses this opportunity to bring some clarity, some instruction in some very specific areas. As we've walked through this book, we've realized that some of the issues they were facing, that the church in Corinth was facing, are the same issues we face in the church today. That the culture in Corinth at the time wasn't too different from our culture today. That's why this series is called Same Difference. Because even though it's a different church at a different time, we still face the same kind of issues and have many of the same problems. Throughout the series, we've talked about a bunch of different topics. We addressed divisions that rose up inside the church in Corinth and how we can protect ourselves from them. We've talked about sexual immorality in marriage. We've talked about how to make decisions in those gray areas of life and how we can exercise incredible freedom as we follow Jesus. A few weeks ago, we talked about how important and valuable communion is to the life of the church. And just this last week, we spent our time looking at how God has gifted each and every one of us. And if we discover and use those gifts, the church, God's church, will be built up. Now, if you've happened to miss any weeks of Same Difference, I encourage you to head to communitycc.net where you can catch up and stream them. It's really worth it. Today we're looking at chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians. But before we can dive into chapter 13, there is this little verse between chapter 12 that we looked at last week and chapter 13 that we're looking at today. There's this one line that Paul writes, and sometimes in some translations of the Bible, it gets tacked on to chapter 12. While in other translations of the Bible, it gets tacked on to chapter 13. And then in some translations, it's just left all by itself. Check out what Paul says. And now I will show you the most excellent way. The most excellent way. It's important that we remember when the Bible was originally written, it didn't look like our Bibles today. There were no chapter numbers or verse numbers or section headings. Instead, each book or letter was just written as one continuous thought, maybe one continuous letter. But over the years, we've added those headings and chapter numbers and verse numbers to help us navigate and make sense of the Bible. So to the Corinthians, chapter 12 and chapter 13, well, they weren't chapter 12 and chapter 13. They were tied together. They were one thought. It was just part of this letter that Paul had written them. So this short sentence, it was Paul's way of attaching these two different thoughts together. It was Paul's way of saying, everything I've just talked about, it's really important. But what's coming next? It's huge. It's even more important. It's most excellent. Paul's saying everything I have said up until this point, it only makes sense if we get this next part right. Chapter 13. This chapter, it might just be one of the most famous chapters in all the Bible. It's a chapter that I'm willing to bet many of us have heard before. It's often called the love chapter of the Bible. It's a chapter that gets quoted or used in weddings. You can find it printed on home decor or artwork and throw pillows because it sounds good. It makes us feel all warm and fuzzy. It gives us all the feels. But it was meant for so much more than that. We have to remember, the Bible wasn't given to us so that we could feel good. The Bible was given to us to transform our lives. In 1 Corinthians 13, it's all about life transformation, specifically in the area of love. When it comes to the word love, we don't really have any problems. It's a word we toss around quite a bit. It's a word that we're all pretty comfortable with. It's a word that my son Noah uses to describe how he feels about his favorite show, Paw Patrol. He loves Paw Patrol. It's a word my daughter Charlotte uses to describe how she feels about reading. She loves to read. It's a word I've used many times to describe how I feel about tacos. I love tacos. And I'm not talking about Taco Bell tacos. I mean real Mexican street tacos. It's a word we use to describe an infatuation we feel for another person, a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a spouse. It's how we talk about a family member that we care deeply for. It's a word used to describe when the Ravens win. Boy, do we love it when they win. Or how we would feel if the Orioles did win. We would love it if they would win. You see, we don't have a problem using the word love. But I think that's part of the problem. It leads to some confusion about what the word really means. It takes some of the power away from the word. In English, we have one word, love. And we use that one word in all of these different settings to describe a multitude of things. And because of that, the word has fallen pretty flat in some ways. It's overused and exhausted. But when the Bible was written, in the original language of the New Testament, Greek, they had 4 different words to use when they talked about love. There was eros, which was used to talk about romantic love. And as much as eros or romantic love can be great, it's not the most excellent way. Then there was storge, which was used to talk about a natural affection, maybe the kind of love you feel towards a parent or a child. Then there was philos, which was used to talk about a brotherly kind of love, a friendship love. It's where Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, gets its name, which if you've ever been to Philadelphia, you've got to wonder how they even got that name in the first place. But even again, it's not the most excellent way. Finally, they have the word agape. And agape was the ultimate kind of love. It's completely unselfish. It's unconditional, unmerited, and an undeserved love. This agape love, it's the most excellent way. It's the kind of love that Paul is talking about. It's really important that we understand the distinction here. Because if we run into this chapter thinking about love the way we think about tacos, we're going to have a problem. We're going to miss what Paul is getting at. Because according to Paul, this love, this agape love, it's the most excellent way. Some versions translate Paul as saying, let me show you a better way or the best way. Paul wasn't talking about romantic love or friendship love or love from a family member. All those loves have conditions and reasons that they might crumble over time. But this love, it's the greatest love. It's the best love. And we could just take Paul's word for it. We could just move forward and say, because Paul says love is important, I'll believe him. But if we step back and look at the Bible as a whole, we see the Bible talks a lot about love. The word love appears 551 times in the Bible, and that's a lot. If the Bible talks about something that much, it must be important. It should tell us that we need to get this right. Jesus talks about this agape love too. Jesus says, my command is this, love each other, agape each other as I have loved you. It's not a recommendation, not a quip, not just a good idea. It's a command. It's that important. And this command should help us realize that this agape love, it's not based on a feeling. Because you can't command someone to feel something, but you can command them to do something. Almost every other time we talk about love, we talk about it as a feeling. But agape love, it's a choice. Another time Jesus says, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciple, if you love one another. Jesus didn't say, everyone will know you're my disciples by how often you go to church or how many Bible verses you memorize. He didn't say people will know you're a Christian by the music you listen to or the movies you watch, but by the way you show unconditional, undeserved, agape love to one another. Not just the people inside of the building, but the people outside of this building as well, to everyone. According to Jesus and according to Paul, love, this agape love, it's a pretty big deal. Now, luckily for us, Paul just doesn't leave us in a lurch to figure it out on our own. We're not left to define what is or what isn't agape love. Just like us, the church in Corinth had a problem with love too. They struggled with how to love one another. We've already looked at how there were divisions that were growing in the church in Corinth. And these internal struggles led certain groups of Christians to talk bad about other groups of Christians inside the church. And people outside of the church in Corinth were looking in, watching all of this unfold. They saw the divisions. They saw the tension. They saw the way they treated each other. And they said, if this is the way Christians behave, if this is the way they love one another, I want no part of this. It was leaving a bad taste in people's mouth for the church and in turn for Jesus. So Paul begins to unpack this most excellent way for them. He begins to show them what real love is. He says, if I speak in the tongue of men or of angels, but I do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. But if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have the faith that can move mountains, but I do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but I do not have love, I am nothing. Paul starts out by reminding the church in Corinth about some things he just got finished talking about. He says, remember all that talk about spiritual gifts? Well, you can know your giftedness inside and out and be using it exactly how God designed you to use it. But if you don't have love, if you've not figured out how to love one another, it's worthless. It's a resounding gong. It's nothing. It's empty. Maybe you've seen the More Cowbell sketch on SNL. It's with Christopher Walken and Will Ferrell, and they're pretending to be the band, the Blue Oyster Cult, kind of working through a creative rut. And to give their band that extra something, they add some cowbell. And then they add more cowbell. And when that's not enough, they add more cowbell. And shocker, adding more cowbell doesn't make it any better. It's just kind of noise, background noise, distracting noise. And Paul is saying, using your spiritual gifts without love, it's just like adding more cowbell. Then he says, maybe you're out there doing all the right things, doing things that look good on the outside, that make you look like you follow Jesus. But if you haven't figured out how to love one another, it's empty too. It's nothing. It's kind of worthless. And that can sound kind of harsh. Remember, he just got finished saying how important gifts and serving were. And maybe at this point, the Corinthian Christians were like, okay, Paul, I'm tracking with you. I don't want to be a banging gong. I don't want to be just more cowbell. I don't want to be empty. So if love is really that important, tell me how to do it. Show me how to love. And that's just what he does. Paul gets into the nuts and bolts of love. He gets really specific here. He makes it easy for them and for us. So we're going to get specific with him. Paul says, love is patient and love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Paul lays it out pretty clearly. It's totally doable. This agape love, it's not rocket science. He's saying you want everything else I've said up until this point to make sense. You want your church, the church, to work as God designed? Then here's what you do. You love one another. You want to know how to love one another? Put this into practice. It's kind of a love for dummies, if you will. A love 101 course for the church in Corinth and for us as well. Paul says these words, these love descriptors, should describe you. I grew up in a student ministry a lot like we have here at CCC. And at one particular event or retreat, someone was teaching on this chapter, and they had us do this specific exercise, and it's really stuck with me. They told us to take the word love out of the verse and replace it with our name. Ryan is patient. Ryan is kind. Ryan does not envy. And the goal was to see if those same statements would be true of us. I think it's a really helpful exercise. And we can actually use chapter 13 here as a little love assessment. In fact, we'll do that right now. As we go through this, maybe you put your name in there and ask yourself, can this be said of me? Does this describe me? Paul starts out and he says, love is patient. Okay, first one here. And here's a way to know maybe if you need some improvement with this. If you've already kind of checked your watch to see how soon this service is going to be done, you probably need a bit more patience in your life. Are you a patient person? Is the love of God in your life helping you become more patient? If you're a parent, how do you do in the patience arena? Do you struggle when your kids stop to use the bathroom for the third, fourth, or fifth time before you're even 15 minutes down the road? Or if you're a student, do you hate to be told just to wait and be patient? Does your time and your schedule trump anything and everyone else's around you? Paul says if you want people to know you follow Jesus, if you want to show love, you've got to be patient. He says love is kind. He doesn't say love is kind when people deserve it. He doesn't say love is kind when people are kind to us first or when it benefits us. Are you kind even if you disagree with someone? If people were to watch all of your interactions in person and online, would they say you are kind? Do you treat every person with kindness no matter what you can get in return? Or do you pick and choose? Do you have a sharp tongue? Do you talk about others when they aren't around or when they can't hear you? Proverbs 16:24 says, gracious or kind words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. It just feels like people could use some healing or kind words these days, doesn't it? There was so much contention and divisive talk in Corinth, and there is in our world today too. And Paul says, you want to love like God? Be kind. Paul says it does not envy. So let's talk about envy. I mean, this is a hard one. We live in a world that is all about keeping up with the Joneses. If they have it, we want it. It doesn't really matter what it is. We see lives of people around us and we compare it to our own. And we can find all these little reasons why our life doesn't match up and why we'd much rather have their life. Social media has just taken this to a whole nother level because people can post or tweet or show whatever they want. Everyone just posts the best of their lives because that's what they want everyone else to see. And this leads to something that sociologists called FOMO. Do you know what FOMO is? It's the fear of missing out. Or in other words, uncontrolled envy. We see what others have or what they say they have, and when we don't have it, we want it, we need it. Whether it's a material thing or relationship, we envy. He says it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking. This is our culture right here, isn't it? We live in a me-first society where it's all about being number one, and it doesn't matter who gets in the way. Maybe it's when you find yourself in a conversation, and all you do is find a way to turn it back to yourself. You got to be first in line, get the raise, get that promotion, be one step ahead of everyone else. But according to Paul, that way of living, it's not agape love. My son Noah, he's about to turn 7 years old. And this fall, he's playing football for the Perry Hall Gators. After a few weeks of practice, the coach started talking about choosing team captains. On the drive home from practice, Noah asked me how to become a team captain. He said, is it the best player on the team? Do I have to be the fastest, throw the furthest, tackle the hardest to become the captain? And I had to stop and think for a minute, because the world might say yes. But I told him, it's not about being the best football player. It's about being the best teammate. Yes, you work hard for yourself, but you help to make your team better. If someone needs help, you help them. It might mean you miss your chance to stand out, but the team is better. That's what Paul's saying this agape love is. You might miss your opportunity to stand out or to get ahead, but that's okay. That's how people will know that you follow Jesus, because you've shown them agape love. He says love is not easily angered. Could you say this about yourself? What does it take for you to fly off the handle? How quickly do you lose your cool? Maybe you ask the people closest to you, or maybe you don't because you already know what the answer is. It keeps no records of wrongs. I'm not proud to say, but this is an area I need to work on. I remember things that people have done wrong against me. I do. And I oftentimes find myself bringing them back up at the perfect time, like I'm some prosecutor trying to win a case. I know how to use them to get what I want and to win an argument. How about you? Is this an area where you can identify? He says, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. As Paul wraps things up here, he gets almost poetic. He paints this beautiful picture of what it would look like if we really lived this out. Wouldn't you want to be described as someone like that? That you always trust, always hope, and you always persevere? Imagine that describing you. Finally, Paul says love never fails. Agape never fails. Man, that right there, living that way, living out agape love, that is a good strategy for life. This kind of love, this agape love, it's love that you can count on. So how'd you do in this little love assessment? Do you get some areas that you could work on? If you're really feeling brave, maybe you ask someone you trust, a spouse, a family member, a trusted friend to walk through it with you. Maybe you have some blind spots you can't see. And here's our challenge for this week. Just pick one. Pick one of those descriptors of love and focus on it this week. Take some time today, maybe early in the week, and just slow down. Ask God to specifically help you develop and grow that descriptor. Then throughout the week, evaluate on how you've been doing. Maybe you choose love is not easily angered. Focus on those situations that you know would push your buttons. And in those moments, pause and ask God just to calm you down, to remove those angered feelings as they creep in and replace it with His agape love. Make the decision to cultivate this agape love in your life. Let me give you an example of how this can play out in the real world. Not long after I joined the staff team here at CCC, I led a group of middle school students to Milligan University in East Tennessee for a summer service trip. And there were hundreds of kids from all over the country that showed up. And it was this incredible week full of great teaching, crazy games, water balloons, just everything a middle schooler would love. Each day, students would head to serve someone in the community who had a physical need they couldn't meet on their own. Our group got to serve this older gentleman in town. And over the past few years, he'd begun to lose his eyesight until he was completely blind. Unfortunately, this led to the interior and exterior of his house just becoming run down. So our group spent the week doing yard work and some minor home improvements to help make his house safer for him. On our first day there, a neighbor who lived down the street walked up as we were working. I remember him asking who we were and why we were there. And before I could answer, one of the students blurted out, well, we're middle schoolers from Community Christian Church in Baltimore, and we're here to help. And as the word Christian came out of their mouth, I could see his face change. The kids got right back to work, but the neighbor hung around. He proceeded to tell me he didn't trust Christians. He had a bad experience with church earlier in his life, and now Christians were only out for themselves. This whole God thing, it just wasn't for him. He kind of snickered at the group and said it was cute what they were there to do, and he just headed back home. Well, the rest of the week, we'd show up and we'd work. And it was hot. I mean, really hot that week. And the kids were sweating. We had to take breaks, but they didn't once complain. We worked from breakfast until dinner, and they didn't fight with each other. If one student got done with their project, they'd jump over and help someone else. I remember I would turn to see a student or a group of students leading this old man by the hand. They'd be explaining to him the flowers they had planted and what color they were and the work that was being done. As we neared the end of the week, his house was transformed. But that wasn't the only thing that happened. On our last day, right as we took a break for lunch, the neighbor showed back up. Only this time he was carrying a stack of pizzas. He handed the pizzas to me and he called all the students over. He proceeded to tell them how he'd been watching all week long. He watched as they pulled weeds and raked leaves and they painted the porch and how they never once complained. He commented on the fact that they didn't fight or argue, that they were kind to one another. He said, "There is no reason you need to be here. There is no reason that a group of middle school students from White Marsh, Maryland should be spending a week of their summer doing yard work in East Tennessee for some old man they don't even know." Later, the neighbor proceeded to tell me that week, a group of middle schoolers began to change his perspective of Christians and his perspective of Jesus as well. He said, "Who knows? I may even give church another shot," all because this group of students was going about agape love. You see, we thought we were there to do yard work, but the biggest thing, the most excellent thing they did that week was love. That right there, that is how the world will know we're Christians. That's how the world will know Jesus, by the way we love. The book of Corinthians has a lot of great, really important instruction on how the followers of Jesus should behave. And I hope we take it all in. I hope we can learn from the church in Corinth. But it all starts here. It all starts with love. And agape love, it never fails. This agape love, it is the most excellent way. Later in the Bible, one of Jesus' closest friends and followers wrote about love. He said this, "We love because he first loved us." This whole chapter, all those love descriptors, it's not something we can generate on our own. Love, agape love, it first came from God. And without God first loving us, we wouldn't be able to show his love to others. Without his example of agape love, we would not be able to live this out. No matter where you stand with the church, no matter where you are in your journey of faith, if you hear nothing else today, this might be the most important thing you hear, that you are loved. God loves you with an agape love, and there is nothing that we have done to earn it. In fact, we don't even deserve it, but yet we receive it anyway. And that is what we remember each week when we celebrate communion together. That God sent his son to live and to die as the ultimate act of love, the ultimate act of unconditional love. Maybe as you take communion, think about how you are loved by God and ask him to open doors to help you find ways to put this agape love on display in your life. Let's pray together and then we'll celebrate communion. God, we are so incredibly thankful that you first loved us. Even though we are undeserving and many times ungrateful, you continue to pour out your agape love onto us. We pause now and we ask you to help us. Help us look more like you to the world around us. Help us to find ways to love those who are closest to us and to those we may never have a chance to meet. We know that we can't love on our own, but it's when we allow your love to flow through us that others will see you. Thank you for your consistent and unfailing love. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
your goodness, I will sing of your love. Though the seasons come quickly, you have always been enough. Though the night may get darker, though the waiting seems long, you have always been faithful to remind me of your love. You are good. In the morning I'll sing. You are good. In the evening I'll sing. You are good. You're good to me. You have always been patient. You have always been kind. You're consistent through the ages. Oh, what a friend of mine. So I remind my soul to bless you, standing firm upon your truth. No, you cannot be shaken, 'cause I've seen what you can do. Oh, you are good. In the morning I'll sing. You are good. In the evening I'll sing. You are good. You're good to me. You keep on getting better. 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 I know you keep on getting better. You keep on getting better. Ooh, you keep on getting better. You keep on getting better. I know you keep on getting better. You keep on getting better. 'Cause you are good. In the morning I'll sing. You are good. In the evening I'll sing. You are good. You're good to me. You are good. In the morning I'll sing. You are good. In the evening I'll sing. You are good. You're good to me.
Thanks again for tuning in and making CCC Online a part of your week. If you'd like to support CCC's efforts to help people find their way back to God financially, you can give through the website or you can text the number on the screen. Your generosity and support really make all the ministry efforts of this church possible. If you're looking for some ways to get involved or take a step in your faith, then you should check out the upcoming session of Discover. It's a class about how to grow your faith at CCC. Make sure and mark your calendars now for September 12th. It's going to be a big day around CCC because the student ministry's fall programming kicks up that day with the fall launch party, and it's Food Truck Sunday. There'll be a bunch of food trucks in the back parking lot. It's going to be a great time to hang out, so invite some friends. Come on out. All the details are on the events page at communitycc.net, and you can check out September's food truck lineup. Don't forget to say hi on social media and connect all week. We'll see you next time, everybody.